I want to apologize that this video seems a little unorganized and chaotic today, but hey, this whole week's been unorganized and chaotic, so I can't imagine it changing now. So I just want to apologize in advance, and also just to let y'all know, I'm running a little behind on the questions and emails and stuff responding to y'all, but hey, I promise I'll get to it. But I got tested for COVID Monday, and thankfully it came back negative, but I wasn't feeling too good this week, but I got over it. And well, then Mrs. River, she wasn't feeling good. Shit, all of a sudden had a sore throat, and a couple days later she was feeling pretty bad. Well, she went and got tested. Well, she tested positive for COVID, and she's bouncing back quickly from it. She had a sore throat, and then, let's see, 2 days after she had that, still had the sore throat, but then she just had no energy. Felt like she was going to fall out. So that's when she got tested. Just letting y'all know what symptoms she had. It's obviously different for everybody. So fortunately, she's bouncing back quick, and either I just showed up negative and got over it real quick, or I'm about to be feeling under the weather. We'll find out shortly, but hopefully that's going to be past us soon. Anyway, so yeah, this week's been an interesting one. And with that said, it's time to start the old versus new 270 comparison. And notice I said comparison and not competition like I did before, because I realized these two rifles aren't competing with each other. They're not in competition with each other, and truthfully, they were designed from day one to complement each other. Okay, and me calling it a competition between them, well, that's just a mistake on my part. And I noticed a lot of y'all caught on to that, and hey, I want to thank y'all right now for not calling me out on it too, and just giving me time to figure that out on my own. It just ain't near as embarrassing when you make a mistake and you figure out on your own you made a mistake versus when everybody lets you know you made a mistake. So, hey, thank y'all. But these two rifles, and these are separated by a lot of years. This Featherweight Model 70, chambered in 270, was made in 1960. This Winchester Westerner right here, also chambered in 270. This particular one was made in 2013. So this is an FN Winchester. And this old Featherweight's a pre-64. Again, separated by quite a few years. But the Featherweight, most of you are familiar with the Featherweight, especially the newer ones. But the older ones, and a lot of y'all didn't even know they had older ones, but Winchester came out with the Featherweight in, I believe, 1954. And I say believe because darn, it's hard to get some facts nowadays. You read one place, so it came out this year, and you read somewhere else, it came out another year. You know, it might not be but a year difference between them, but you know, that's the difference between being right and wrong. So, we're going to just say about on every bit of this. Okay, Winchester came out with the Featherweight in 1954. And they came out with it to go with a brand new cartridge that they had offered. The 308 Winchester. A couple of y'all might have heard of that one. But the 308 was basically just an updated version of a really popular, already existing cartridge, the 300 Savage. Okay, and then the military did a few things with the 300 Savage just to bring it up to speed for what they were looking for in a new service rifle, which was the M14, or would become the M14. Okay, well, Winchester was part of the development process, and then Winchester said, well, hey, we'll just release that as just a great hunting cartridge, you know, updated 300 Savage. And the 300 Savage had been extremely popular for, you know, quite a few years up to that point. Well, Winchester also wanted to release a new rifle just to go with it. They wanted a light, easy handling hunting rifle, something easy to carry. So they came out to Featherweight. And it wasn't the most popular, but then they added a few more cartridges to it, the 243 and the 270 and 30-06, and it became a pretty popular rifle. Well, about the time it was really starting to get popular, they came out with another new cartridge. And this time, instead of looking at what had worked really well in the past, the 300 Savage, they were trying to think ahead. Okay, what's going to be popular in the future? So they came out with a new cartridge, the 264 Winchester Magnum. They thought, hey, that'll make a really nice, long-range precision hunting rifle. I don't know what they were thinking. I mean, how could they imagine a 6.5 bullet would ever be popular for hunting? Where would they get such an idea? But that's what they were thinking for some reason, because that's what a 264 is, a 6.5 millimeter diameter. So they came up to 264 Win Mag for long-range precision hunting because of its high ballistic coefficient. And they came out with a brand new rifle for it also. And they came out with the 264, I believe, in 1959, but they didn't start producing the rifle until 1960. And that was the Winchester Model 70 Westerner. And the Westerner was designed from day one to be a long-range precision hunting rifle to go with that new long-range precision cartridge. And everything was looking pretty good until along about 1964. And ain't it funny how everything in Winchester history always just seems to go back to 1964? Well, they discontinued making both the Featherweight and the Westerner in 1964. But keep in mind at that time, those two rifles were made for very different purposes. All right, you had your lightweight, quick handling, easy to carry Featherweight, and then you had your long-range precision Winchester Westerner, made specifically for hunting out west where you had the extreme long distances and such. And the Westerner, the original one, came with a 26-inch barrel because you needed that 26-inch barrel to get the max velocity out of that 264 Win Mag. Right, well, both got discontinued in 1964. Well, then both were reintroduced in 1981. And the Featherweight, it remained popular to this day. In 1981, they came out the XTR Featherweight. It stayed into production all the way up to now. The Westerner, they produced it until 1985. All right, so it didn't stay in production very long, and they offered it in a few cartridges then, and I still don't have all the details on it. Right, but they offered it in 7mm Remington Magnum, 270 Winchester, and 243 that I know of. Right, well, they discontinued it in 1985. Well, then in 2013, Winchester made just a special run of non-cataloged Winchester Model 70 Westerners, and this particular one's in 270. I don't know if they offered it in any other cartridges that year. I spoke with the people at Winchester briefly on that, and they were going to look up and find out what they could, because they didn't have any information on it at all other than it was made in 2013. That's all they could tell me, but it kind of piqued their curiosity, and they did tell me it was a part of a special run, very limited run. All right, well, I never heard back from them, so I don't know what else it was offered in. I'll just tell you that, there's a couple of them out there in 270. Okay, which brings us up to now. The role of the Featherweight hasn't changed in all these years. The new ones, they look a little bit different with that snobble forend, but other than that, it's pretty much the same rifle. And the role of the Westerner, it hasn't changed in all that time. This one's got a 24-inch barrel instead of a 26. But it's amazing how close to the original that the reissues were. I've been really impressed with that. And right down to the reissue that they did in 2013 even has steel bottom metal on it. The trigger guard's aluminum, but the floor plate's actually steel. That's shocked me, I'll be honest. All right, so they remained pretty faithful to the original, right down to the flip-up marbles rear sight and the Williams front bead. And if you'll notice, the rear sight on the Westerner here, well, it is the same rear sight and front bead that's on the Featherweight. And that was one of the difference between both of these models and the standard issue Model 70s, pre-64 or post. The rear sight was dovetailed into the barrel versus having the sight set up that they had on the standard issue ones. Okay, so that's where we're at on these two particular rifles as far as just a little basic background on them. But when I picked up this Featherweight here, my first thought was, okay, I don't need another 270, but I got another 270 because I really wanted this rifle. And I was excited to get it, and I was excited about it, and I said, okay, well, we'll have a little competition between these two to see which one I end up hunting with this year, as far as my 4-gun set that I've been talking about and working on. And again, a lot of y'all noticed, or y'all were very polite about it and didn't just come out and say it, but they're different rifles. They have different purpose, different use. And when it really hit me on these two was when it's time to start working up loads and picking scopes. Okay, that's when, oh yeah, they are different. So now let me show you where we're at on these two with the setups. For scopes, I have identical Burris 4.5 by 14 by 42 E1s mounted on both rifles. I've got identical Weaver rings and bases on each rifle. Now keep in mind, these aren't the scopes I'm going to use for hunting with either of them. The reason these are on here now is just for the comparison between the two for the load testing. I like a higher magnification scope for load testing. And if we're going to be comparing shot groups between the two, then why not use identical scopes, rings, and bases? That way we're comparing apples to apples on our shot groups. So we're not comparing a shot group, that was fired from a rifle with a 14 power scope versus a shot group from a rifle that was, had a 7 power scope. Right? So that's the thinking there. Unfortunately, I'm already running into an issue with the bases on the Featherweight here. I actually carried both rifles to the range this morning, was planning on starting the load testing. But I ran out of travel on my scope on this Featherweight for elevation and windage. So I've got a problem with the bases here. All right, so I'm going to have to go back to the drawing board on that. And I've always used Weaver bases. I mean, they just, we each have what we like, but I've always liked having the 2-piece bases. They're lightweight, they're easy to work with. They don't cost much, and I've never had a failure. But the last couple of times, I seem to have had some issues with the Weaver bases, just especially windage issues. So I think I'm fixing to make a change here, and I'm not sure what base I'm going to go with, and I'm probably going to change rings also. That's something I'm going to look at this week. Unfortunately, things are getting a little tricky right now as far as getting even rings. Go try to find some Weaver or Leopold high rings right now. I didn't realize those were getting tough to find. There's some more expensive options still available, but as far as You know, the Weaver or Leopolds that had the Weaver style bases are set up for Weaver bases. You know, that's starting to get tough to find. I can get mediums and I can get extra highs, but I was having a tough time finding larges, and I couldn't find any locally. So that actually turned into an ordeal, just, you know, getting to where we're at. But I am going to do a little research this week, and I'm going to make some changes there. I'll probably end up going with a one-piece base for this featherweight. I don't want to do a Picatinny rail. I'm not a fan of those for a hunting rifle. I understand, you know, that them being wonderful for a target rifle and for ARs and so on. Right, but this is getting into one of the differences between the hunting side and the tactical side. On the tactical side, you're generally making a lot of changes, and you know, you want that versatility there as far as swapping out optics and so forth. On the hunting side, a really good hunting rifle, you just want to set it up and it just work, and you not have to ever think about it again and nothing change. All right, so, you know, that's kind of why I don't want to go with the Picatinny rail. And for me, all those little slots, that's just places to accumulate, you know, debris and so forth, and just something else to clean between. And so I don't want to go that route, but I'm going to seriously look at some one-piece bases. And I've heard in the past that a one-piece base strengthens your action just a little bit. All right, decreases flex, so to speak. I don't know that it's enough to even matter, especially on the hunting rifle. But I've kind of been leaning toward one-piece bases since then. Now, I don't want to go with the loophole dovetail rings, you know, that rotate. There's advantages to those. But I'm a firm believer with those, you really need the gauges with the points that, you know, that way you can line everything up and make sure, you know, you're dead nuts lengthwise as far as, you know, the rings being centered on each other and rotationally. They have to line up. The Weavers, you know, assuming the bases are made well, that's not an issue. All right, so we're going to go back to the drawing board on that. And whatever change I make to the featherweight, I'm probably going to make to the Westerner also. One thing I really got annoyed with the Weaver bases was the slotted screws that, you know, still come with them. I mean, for our starting load on both of these, for the bullet, we're going to begin with the Hornady 140 grain interlock boat tail soft point. All right, it's not necessarily my first choice for either one of them, but these are available right now. And hey, that's worth a lot. Our local gun shop, they still have a few Hornady bullets left. And they're good bullets. When I say they wouldn't necessarily be my first choice, it's not that I have anything against them. It's just in this old Winchester here, just for nostalgia's sake, I would just assume go with a, you know, Winchester PowerPoint in it. And I suspect PowerPoints would shoot pretty well in it also. I ain't getting any of those anytime soon. So. And, okay, as far as bullet weight for the featherweight, again, they're different rifles, different purposes. I want to slow this one down. Okay, this is meant to be a quick handling, lightweight, easy to carry, great intermediate range rifle that's really versatile. All right, so this was never meant to be a long range precision target rifle. So I wanted to go with a little bit heavier bullet in this one and then set up a load that's on the lower end of the velocity. I figured 2,700 feet per second, somewhere around that that would be ideal in this rifle. And 140 grain 270, you can slow that down no problem. You've got great sectional density, so you're still going to get great penetration. And this bullet actually works for this because a boat tail soft point is made for long distance shooting. All right, so these are made for impact at long distances. which means slower velocity. These are generally soft bullets. Well, that's what I'm going to do at close range by slowing this down. I'm going to have a slower velocity because, again, I slowed it down. So I want a soft bullet for this. I think that's going to work out really well. And that 140 grains is, I think it's going to be perfect around 2,700 feet per second. 28 would be okay, but just somewhere in that area. So that's what we're working on with this. And for powder, I'm going with IMR 4451 for this one. Okay, the 4451, the burn rate on this is really close to the traditional IMR 4350, and the 4350 is great powder and been around forever. But this is one of IMR's new Enduron powders. So it's temperature insensitive. I won't have to worry about the changes in temperature affecting my velocity and pressures. And I don't know if it even matters, but these are supposed to also help with prevent copper phallic. We'll see. So that's where we're at on this one. And I'm also going to use Remington cases for brass. Again, not first choice, and I don't have a thing in the world against Remington brass. Just for this old rifle, or both of them, hey, I should be using Winchester just because they're Winchesters. And if I was setting up a 700, then I would be saying, hey, Remington brass. But just for nostalgia, I'd prefer to use Winchester brass. But back to the Remington brass was available. We're using what's available. And I don't even know that it's available now. And I'm using Federal primers. So, we're going to see how this works out on the loads. That's where we're starting on this one. All right, for the Winchester Westerner, this is going to be a long-range precision hunting rifle. That's my intent with it the day I bought it. That's going to be its purpose. So for this one, I'm going with the same 140 grain interlock Hornady. I thought about going with the 130 grain just for higher velocities. And I love a 130 grain bullet. But when I actually got to looking at the numbers, this 140 grain's got such a better ballistic coefficient on it, being a boat tail, that in terms of my maximum point blank range, which is what I'm using most of the time, and just for those of you that aren't familiar, I've talked about it a lot before, but it's something everybody needs to know. Your maximum point blank range is how far away you can shoot a certain diameter target and still hit it before the bullet drops below it. All right, so for a 6-inch circle, for a 270 with a 130 grain bullet, you're looking at the velocities I should end up with are close. Y'all gonna have to forgive my neighbor over there. He's building away on something. I ain't figured out if it's a house or a chicken coop, I'll be honest. And you'd have to see the structure to appreciate it. So he's gonna be hammering and sawing away, I guess. But I wish him luck on that one. He's sure gonna need it, but anyway. Okay, so 130 grain bullet on 270. You're generally looking at about a 300 yard maximum point blank range. So with the velocity it's getting and its ballistic coefficient, you can aim just dead center on a 6-inch diameter circle and you can hit it from the muzzle to 300 yards. The slower you're going, or the worse your ballistic coefficient is, and ballistic coefficient is just aerodynamic, so that's the amount of drag on your bullet. And if you've got a bullet that's not very aerodynamic, it's just going to slow down quicker. That's all that means. Okay, with a lot of hunting today, a lot of people, they're using the laser range finders. They're getting their yardage, then they're dialing their scope and they're adjusting their elevation to compensate for bullet drop at distance. And that, hey, if you're somewhere that you know, you've got a lot of open areas, and you know, that might be a really great system. But for a lot of us, that really doesn't work. Okay, here where I'm at in the South, it's, you know, it's pretty thick here. Now that doesn't mean we don't have places where you have long shots. It's just the places that we have with long shots, they're generally power lines, pipelines, you know, road bed, really thick clear cut where you can just see in pockets. When deer come out in those places, you almost never have time to, you know, get your yardage with that laser rangefinder, then adjust your rifle, then take the shot. Right. Generally, those places, especially on into hunting season when the deer has some pressure on them, they're going across fairly quick. They're not running, but they're not hanging out in open areas. Let's put it that way. Maximum point blank range, using that, you're going to be able to just put on the deer, shoot. Right. There's no thinking. If you know what your maximum point blank range is, you have your rifle set up for that, and the deer is within the yardage of your maximum point blank range. Well, that's where the 270 shines. It's got a very high initial muzzle velocity. Well, velocity is your primary factor in determining maximum point blank range. Okay, and a lot of you know this, but just for those of you that don't, gravity pulls everything down at the same rate. All right, so if you've got a 500-pound, you know, cannonball, and you've got a 5-ounce bullet, they're both going to fall at the same rate. Okay, so as far as trajectory, if you take away, you know, if they're traveling at the same velocity, and you take away the aerodynamic factor, all right, they're both going to have the same trajectory because gravity is going to pull them both down at the same rate. Well, with bullets, it doesn't matter if you've got a heavier bullet or a lighter bullet as far as, you know, gravity changing the trajectory. So a heavy bullet doesn't necessarily have a shorter range before it starts falling. But what matters is speed, because they fall at the same rate. The bullet that's traveling the fastest is going to be further down range before it falls versus a slow one, because they're both falling at the same rate, but this one's traveling so much faster it just gets further down range, you know, within that same amount of time. Right. And again, that's where 270's always shined. It had a really high initial velocity. Well, these 140 grain bullets, they don't have as high of an initial velocity as a 130 grain bullet, but they do have a better ballistic coefficient. And when I checked, you know, between the two, comparing the 130 grain Hornady, which I can also still get those locally, and these 140 grain Bucktail soft points, what I came up with on the ballistic range calculator was 304 yards for the 130 grain and then 302 yards for the 140 grain, you know, factoring in their different ballistic coefficients and these having the slower velocity. I only came out 2-yard difference on their maximum point blank range. And then once you start getting out even further, these are going to start pulling away from the 130s because of the better ballistic coefficient. And if you get out even further, that's where the extra mass of this 140 grain is going to start really shining versus 130. You're going to get better penetration, you know, when they do start slowing down. So that's what my thinking is on this. And I'm trying a very different powder for this rifle. I'm also using Remington brass for this one, same as the Featherweight. And again, that's what I could get. And same way on powder. I'm trying something new here because this is what I could get. We're going to try Magpro on this. And I've never tried this. This is a lot slower burning powder, and the name indicates, it's more for Magnum rifles. But I've heard a lot of people have had a lot of success in this on 270. All right, so we're going to try that. And I didn't fire any shots with the loads I'm starting it. I wanted to wait until both rifles were set up and ready for, you know, when I start the load testing. I want to be able to finish it and compare results. But I did get to run some fouling shots through the Westerner here and got it on paper. And let's just say it seems pretty promising thus far. And real quick, here's a clip of that. My first two shots are right there touching each other. All of a sudden, my third shot is, you know, we'll just say I did not move the scope. I know it looked good on paper. It looked like, hey, he adjusted that scope and he's almost on the center. No, that shot was just off from the other two. But I did notice on the chronograph, let's see, that I was running 2,900 feet a second on this first two. I was running 2,970 on that third one. And the factory ammo that I used just for the fouling shots there, it was a Hornady whitetail something, but it was a 130 grain interlock bullet. So should, you know, be very similar to these 140s. And what was happening there on that third shot, again, those were fouling shots. Okay, so, you know, we're starting to get a little fouling build up by that third shot. Plus, on this particular rifle, I bought this one used. I don't think this rifle's been shot. I mean, I'm sure somebody put a few rounds through it, and it came with a scope, a very badly mounted scope, by the way. A very nice scope, but very poorly mounted. The base on this had a Steiner mounted on it. Yeah, great scope. But the bases on it, the front screw and the base, it was a one-piece base and ring. And the front screw was not in the action at all. And I don't know what they messed up there, but if they had any accuracy issues, you know, one of the screws missing out of one of your bases, you know, that can contribute to it. So if they got rid of the rifle, that might have had something to do with it there. But anyway, this one, just looking at the barrel, looking at the muzzle, I don't think there's been a box of bullets gone through this rifle. I don't think there's been half a box of bullets fired through this rifle. So those fouling shots that I fired to start with, I cleaned the barrel just any rifle that's new to me, I start off cleaning the barrel. This barrel was cleaned. I don't know if they cleaned it or what, but looking at the wear on the rifle and so forth, the muzzle, I just don't think they ever fired any shots through it. I don't think there was ever anything there too clean to speak of. So when you start off with the brand new barrel, generally your velocities are slower. And a lot of you heard about breaking in barrels. Okay, my thoughts on that topic have changed over time. I used to be a firm believer in breaking in a barrel. I can't say it helped. I can't say it hurt. All I can say is the rifles that I broke in the barrels on were tack drivers. Okay, so I tell you it didn't hurt. All right, whether or not it made any difference, who knows, and we'll never know. But with the barrels today and the manufacturing processes they use today, I don't think there's any need to go through a break-in process on a barrel as far as the cleaning and all that stuff. But you still have to break in a barrel as far as getting enough rounds through it. And you can take a brand new rifle and they're almost always going to start out with low velocity. Then after you get, you know, a few boxes of bullets through that rifle, your velocities are going to pick up. So on this particular rifle, I think that's what we got going on with this one. When that velocity jumped up 70 feet per second on that third shot, point of impact change, you know, I think those truly were some fouling shots going through theirs. But that's where we're at on these two rifles right now with the new 270 versus the old 270. Okay, and I don't know how this project's going to play out. I have had a lot of projects that ended in absolute, complete, and utter chaos. But darn, I hadn't had many that started out in chaos. But this one seems to be. So that's where we're at the moment. But keep in mind, I said before, setting up a rifle is a process. It's not I slapped the scope on it, put a few bullets in it, went to the range, bam, we're done and shooting. To get a rifle truly where it needs to be, for me anyway, and maybe it's just I do things wrong. That's very possible. But for me, it's a process, and the process on comparing these two and getting everything set up as far as load testing and so forth, the process of comparing these two has started. I can't tell you where it's going to end. But hey, if you want to find out, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. And if you got anything from this video, please give it a thumbs up. And I think that covered it for today. God bless and have a good day.